part of me wonders is that the timing of this settlement gives them some leeway that Disney may take a flyer, because I promise you there is some number cruncher at Disney right now. Guys, if we put Gina in this movie, well, let me add a little bit more color here for you and for the audience, going back to the Gina situation specifically. You mentioned earlier, what is the likelihood that she would once again work with Disney? With this lawsuit concluded, we look forward to identifying opportunities to work together with Miss Carano in the near future. Now, let me kind of stab on that line for a minute. I think in large respect, you are correct. Although me, as kind of the Hollywood entertainment business nerd that I am, the timing of this, I can't get it out of my head that it is a little curious. And here's why. You're saying there's no opportunity for her, but there really actually is. And you've got right now, you have a movie coming out next summer, which is the last gasp for Star Wars. And it's the Mandalorian and Grogu movie, which is a franchise that Gina Carano helped launch back in 2020. She was a major part of that with Cara Dune. She wasn't in Mando season 3, which was a disaster, and they've tried to launch from that into season 4. But the last thing Gina Carano was in that everybody remembers her for, in fact, her action figures, her toys, her merch were second in sales behind Mando and Grogu, like her personal Cara Dune character. The last time we saw her was when Luke Skywalker walked in and at the end of Mando season 2, if y'all can believe it in the audience, 5 years ago, Christmas of 2020. That was the biggest moment, bar none, that Disney Plus has ever had with any of its original television shows. They are wrapping filming, or they're still in the process of filming right now, the last bit of principal photography for the Mando and Grogu movie due out next summer. They just had an absolute disaster with Fantastic Four that we talked about earlier. Guess who was built up by Disney at the cost of likely tens of millions of dollars of marketing on him personally, PR and everything else? All these massive interviews they did with him, building up Pedro Pascal. Pedro's everywhere. Hell, Pedro was supposed to be in the new banger horror movie that came out this weekend, Weapons. Thank God for David Zaslav and Warner Brothers that his schedule fell apart and they had to recast the whole movie. Imagine if Pedro Pascal was in that movie that just came out this weekend after the last 2 disasters he's had in the last month that he was in. It would have sunk the movie. Pedro Pascal was also the guy who was out there posting while he was playing Mando that half of the country, more than half of the country, all the Donald Trump supporters were and so on and so forth, comparing Trump and all of his supporters to all of this in Instagram posts, Twitter posts, Facebook posts, all this kind of stuff. Absolutely, objectively inarguable political statements about half the country. Gina Carano, let's face it, really didn't. Gina was the one that got the short end of the stick. Right now, as the Walt Disney Companies we talked about in some videos last week, absolutely has to be very nervous right now because their push for Pedro to make him a thing, to basically
to make him happen.
Yeah, to make him happen. You stop trying to make Fetch happen. Fetch isn't going to happen. Mean Girls reference. It absolutely didn't work. And that was the one thing they were hoping, that if we can make Pedro into a big celebrity, not only will that boost Fantastic Four, which it clearly didn't. It's a big fail. Fantastic Four is now the 7th biggest movie of the summer. The 7th. It was
not a good thing.
That's not a good thing at all. And it ain't over yet. But they were really hoping that if Fantastic Four would be successful and put a lot of gravitas beneath Pedro Pascal as a big screen star and not just a TV show star, that would help launch into next summer when Mando and Grogu came out, which hasn't had any energy behind it at all by the time the movie releases, 5.5 years.
You're right on a micro level. I see the logic.
Now you got Gina who could step in. They could do some reshoots, which Disney is utterly famous for doing massive reshoots in everything
Right? That's
they
not
do.
a problem for them.
Part of me wonders is that the timing of this settlement gives them some leeway, and especially with that statement, it could be interpreted, if you want to be optimistic about things, that Disney may take a flyer, because I promise you there is some number cruncher at Disney right now. Guys, if we put Gina in this movie, how many more tens of millions of box office will that translate into? And Ron, one last final thought. The Mando movie is being done by Jon Favreau in his own Golem creations. You know, he's a hired gun by Lucasfilm. Gina doesn't have to go around Kathy and all the crazy women that run the story group at Lucasfilm. This is a Jon Favreau production. Jon loves Gina. He was pissed when they did that to Gina. And in fact, there was a lot of us speculating at the time that Jon may not even come back after this because of what they did to him by doing what they did to Gina. So there is a window here. I can't tell you how big that window is, but it is something that is fun to speculate about from an academic perspective.
You absolutely nailed the point that I was going to make, which is, can they get the bean counters, get past the egos in the C-suite and say, we really stand to make some money here, even though every single mention of Gina in that movie, even if it's just a cameo, is going to pinch you. Not because you yourself, because again, I have always taken the position, as you might recall, I don't really think Disney management has any principles. I don't think they're left wing or right wing. I think they're just whatever they think is the way, not to maximize Disney's interest, but to maximize their personal interests as stockholders and as executives and self-dealing executives. And but this is still a big climb down for them. And as you point out, one of a series of them. Do they want to be reminded of that? Will that take away? I mean, think of all the things they've done that any fresh MBA could have told them was a terrible idea from a marketing perspective, from a merchandising perspective, from a market segmentation perspective. All the things that, like what you just said, makes perfect sense. But so do a million things that Disney has done or has declined to do because they are Disney.
Yeah, it's speculative to be sure.
That's okay. That's what we're here for.
That is exactly it. Here's the other part of it, Ron. I'll throw yet another wrinkle into this for you to consider, is that we know at this point that, and I think that I've projected that we could hear something as early as late October, early November, whenever the next Disney earnings call will be slated for. It's usually that first week of, following the month after the end of the quarter. So November, early November. That will be the close of the fourth fiscal quarter, the opening of fiscal year 26 for Disney. And that's probably where we're going to hear, I think, an announcement for the successor of Bob Iger. Jim Gorman of Morgan Stanley, the former chairman and CEO of Morgan Stanley, has been leading the Disney board in that search effort now for about a year. It may be Josh D'Amaro. It may be Dana Walden. It may be somebody not even at Disney. The audience knows my preference in this, that it's somebody not even at Disney. I don't have a lot of faith that's going to happen. That being said, effectively, Ron, by the time this movie comes out next summer, Bob Iger will be walking out the door, or just about
for real this time.
For real. Well, with the exception of his 5-year pension / consultancy position, right? But he's no longer going to be officially the CEO. He's no longer going to officially be the executive chairman or on the board, so on and so forth. There is also the expectation, as is common when somebody like Iger retires or steps down, is that a lot of the C-suite people are likely to follow him right out the door. Now, I don't think that somebody like the current CFO, Hugh Johnston, I know everybody, Hugh Johnston is going to, because he's only been there now about a year since Christine McCarthy hightailed it out, probably because of Bob Iger. But there are going to be other folks. Don't be surprised if you see some of the studio heads, some of the other C-suite executives, and quite frankly, the indication has now been there the last several months with the interviews from official trades, everything kind of lining up that Kathleen Kennedy is also probably going to be moseying on down the road herself, probably when Bob Iger exits. That would be, I think, the most likely situation. Those two are about the same age. They're in their early to mid 70s, getting into the mid 70s now. Kathleen Kennedy said, she's never going to stop making movies, but when she was asked if she was still going to be head of Lucasfilm, her answer was, "Oh, I'm never going to stop making movies." Yeah, okay. Well, we didn't expect you to, but you may not be doing it as a studio head at Lucasfilm. I think she's going to retire at that point. By the time this movie comes out, we already may have new leadership either in transition or at least announced to come in. So I don't know how much her being on a set that is being independently operated, effectively independently operated by Jon Favreau and Gollum Creations, his studio. When a lot of the key players that caused the issue, and let's be honest, it was overwhelmingly Kathleen Kennedy. Overwhelmingly her and all the girls that she hired to run the Lucasfilm Story Group, and some of the boys too that might as well be girls. They're kind of on the way out, it seems like, at least in terms of the power they had over the last several years. They may still be there, but it seems like something. I'm not going to tell you Star Wars is saved tomorrow. Please don't misinterpret what I'm saying. But for all the reasons that I said for years, Gina wouldn't come back as long as Kathleen Kennedy's still there, we may now finally be at that point to where that may no longer be an impediment if an offer was put on the table. And I think maybe that had to do with some of the language in the settlement that Disney put out, because I would presume, Ron, that kind of language that Disney issued in that statement, would that not have perhaps been mutually agreed to by both legal counsel parties?
Oh, of course. That was
There you go.
Every single letter of every single word was negotiated there.
Yeah.
And the fact is, at the end of the day, it would be a brilliant move. It would be a brilliant move. They could actually buy some goodwill that they have so recklessly, pissed away over the last 5 to 10 years.
Yeah.
So, it makes a lot of sense. I'd like to be wrong. My prediction doesn't hinge on whether or not she works with Disney again. My prediction is Disney's going to make sure part of this deal is that she's going to work again, and Disney's going to make it happen.
Make sure you're subscribed to Valiant Renegade and join us every Sunday at 6 p.m. Eastern for the live show.